Think you know everything about Eddie Murphy's 1992 romantic comedy Boomerang? From Grace Jones literally slapping Murphy in an unscripted moment to the film being shot in a hotel suite personally redesigned by Ivana Trump, this seemingly straightforward rom-com harbors some of the most bizarre behind-the-scenes secrets in Hollywood history. Prepare to discover the wild production stories, casting mishaps, and cultural impact that made this film far stranger than its polished surface suggests. Fact 1. Grace Jones's unscripted paper slap. When Grace Jones whacked Eddie Murphy across the face with a pad of paper during the board meeting scene in Boomerang, it wasn't in the script at all. The iconic supermodel and actress completely improvised the moment, and Murphy's startled reaction you see on screen is absolutely genuine because he had no idea it was coming. The scene takes place during a corporate meeting where the advertising team is presenting perfume names to Jones's character, Stranger, the eccentric French spokesperson for the new fragrance. Director Reginald Hudlin was filming the sequence when Jones suddenly decided to take matters into her own hands and deliver an unexpected slap to Murphy's face using whatever was nearby, which happened to be a notepad or paper pad. According to the director's commentary on the film, this spontaneous moment perfectly captured the unpredictable energy that Grace Jones brought to every single day of filming. Hudlin has described how Jones was always 100% committed to her character and would do the absolute craziest thing at any given moment, making her absolutely perfect for the role that was essentially written as a parody of her own larger-than-life persona. What makes this moment even more remarkable is that Murphy, who was known for his quick wit and improvisational skills from his Saturday Night Live days, was genuinely caught off guard. His surprised expression and reaction weren't acted at all. They were his real response to being unexpectedly struck by one of the most unpredictable performers in entertainment. The slap became one of the most memorable moments in a scene that was already filled with Grace Jones's outrageous and over-the-top performance, and it shows how sometimes the best moments in movies happen when actors go completely off script and trust their instincts. Fact 2. Ivana Trump's secret hotel design. The luxurious bedroom where Lady Eloise seduces Marcus in Boomerang wasn't just any ordinary hotel suite. It was actually a room at the Boston Park Plaza that had been personally redesigned by Ivana Trump herself, which explains why the setting looks so uniquely opulent and over-the-top glamorous. In the film, this is the scene where Marcus, played by Eddie Murphy, reluctantly spends the night with the aging cosmetics company owner Lady Eloise, hoping it will help him get promoted after the corporate merger. The bedroom they filmed in features incredibly lavish and distinctive styling that perfectly matches the character's wealthy and extravagant personality. With rich fabrics, ornate furnishings, and an overall sense of expensive luxury that feels almost theatrical. What audiences didn't know while watching the movie was that this wasn't just clever set design by the film's production team. The filmmakers had specifically chosen to shoot in a suite that Ivana Trump, the former wife of Donald Trump, had personally redesigned during her time as an interior designer and businesswoman in the early 1990s. Her signature style of bold, luxurious, and sometimes excessive decoration was exactly what the scene needed to convey Lady Eloise's character and lifestyle. The choice to film in Ivana Trump's redesigned suite turned out to be perfect for the story because it gave the bedroom scenes an authentic feeling of wealth and power that matched what the script was trying to communicate about Lady Eloise's position as a successful cosmetics mogul. The unique styling and attention to detail in the room's design helped create the right atmosphere for one of the film's most memorable and slightly uncomfortable seduction scenes, where Marcus realizes he's in way over his head. Fact 3. The foot fetish origin story. Marcus Graham's strange obsession with women's feet in Boomerang actually came from a real person that director Reginald Hudlin knew, except the original inspiration was even weirder because this friend of his wouldn't date a woman unless he liked her back teeth, not her feet. In the movie, Marcus is shown as an incredibly picky womanizer who will sleep with beautiful women but then find the most ridiculous reasons to break up with them, and his biggest deal breaker is always their feet. The most memorable example happens early in the film when he sleeps with Christy, played by Layla Roshan, but then rejects her the next morning after lifting up the bed covers to check out her toes and deciding she has what he calls hammer toes. Director Reginald Hudlin has explained that he needed a visual way to show how unreasonably picky and shallow Marcus was as a character, and he wanted something that would clearly demonstrate the arc of his growth throughout the story. Hudlin came up with the foot obsession based on conversations he'd had with friends about a guy they knew who was so incredibly particular about women that he would actually examine their back teeth before deciding whether to pursue them romantically. When Hudlin was developing the script, he realized that showing someone checking back teeth wouldn't work visually for a movie, so he changed it to feet instead, because it would be much easier to film and would have the same effect of showing how ridiculous Marcus's standards were. The foot obsession also worked perfectly as a plot device, because it allowed the filmmakers to show Marcus's character development later in the story when he falls in love with Angela and doesn't even notice or care what her feet look like. Fact 4. John Witherspoon's post-production edition. Every single scene featuring John Witherspoon as Mr. Jackson in Boomerang was filmed after the main production had already wrapped, and it only happened because Eddie Murphy specifically demanded that the filmmakers bring Witherspoon back to add more content to the movie. Witherspoon plays Gerard's father in the film, and he's absolutely hilarious in the Thanksgiving dinner scene where he shows up wearing an incredibly outrageous monochromatic suit with mushroom print lining and a matching shirt that makes him look like he stepped out of a fashion magazine from another planet. His character delivers some of the movie's funniest lines and creates memorable moments that audiences still quote today. But none of this was originally planned during the initial filming schedule. After Eddie Murphy saw the rough cut of the movie, he felt strongly that something was missing and insisted that the production team bring back John Witherspoon, who had worked with director Reginald Hudlin before on House Party. Murphy was so convinced that Witherspoon would add the right energy to the film that he made it a requirement, and the studio agreed to fund additional shooting days specifically for these new scenes. What makes Witherspoon's performance even more impressive is that he chose his own completely outlandish wardrobe for the character and improvised all of his dialogue on the spot. The filmmakers basically gave him the basic situation of the scenes and then let him create his own lines and physical comedy, which explains why his performance feels so natural and spontaneous compared to the more scripted moments in the rest of the film. This last-minute addition turned out to be one of the best decisions made during the entire production, because Witherspoon's scenes became some of the most memorable and frequently quoted parts of the movie. Fact 5. Halle Berry was the only audition. Halle Berry never had to compete against other actresses for the role of Angela in Boomerang because she was literally the only person who auditioned for the part, and Eddie Murphy was so impressed by her screen test that he immediately told director Reginald Hudlin there was no point in seeing anyone else. Angela is the sweet, artistic co-worker who eventually becomes Marcus's love interest after he gets his heart broken by his manipulative boss Jacqueline. The character was supposed to be the more down-to-earth alternative to Robin Givens's glamorous and calculating character, someone who represented genuine love and emotional connection rather than just physical attraction and game playing. Director Reginald Hudlin has said that he knew immediately after Berry came in and did her reading that she was perfect for Angela. But he was actually nervous about whether Eddie Murphy would agree with his choice. At the time, Berry had only appeared in a couple of films and wasn't yet the major star she would later become, so casting her was something of a risk for such an important role in a big-budget Eddie Murphy comedy. However, Hudlin's concerns turned out to be completely unnecessary because after Berry performed her screen test, Murphy immediately told him, "Well, that's it. There's no need to see the other two actresses because she's the part." Murphy was so convinced that Berry was exactly what the role needed that he didn't want to waste time looking at other options or second-guessing the decision. This instant casting decision turned out to be incredibly smart because Berry's natural warmth and charm made Angela feel like a real person rather than just a typical romantic comedy love interest, and her chemistry with Murphy helped make their eventual romance feel genuine and earned rather than forced. Fact 6. The script was originally for Arsenio Hall. The Boomerang screenplay that eventually became Eddie Murphy's romantic comedy was initially developed with completely different stars in mind, specifically Arsenio Hall and Whitney Houston, before being completely reworked to fit Murphy's personality and acting style. According to production reports from 1991, the original script was created as a project that would pair the popular late-night talk show host Arsenio Hall with the superstar singer Whitney Houston in what would have been a very different kind of romantic comedy. Hall was at the peak of his television fame with The Arsenio Hall Show, which was one of the most popular late-night programs on television, and Houston was one of the biggest music stars in the world, following her massive success with songs like I Will Always Love You. The pairing of Hall and Houston would have created an entirely different dynamic and tone for the story, since both performers had very different comedic and dramatic styles, compared to what Murphy eventually brought to the project. Hall's comedy was generally more laid-back and conversational, while Huston's screen presence was more focused on her musical talents rather than the kind of sharp comedic timing that the final version of Marcus Graham required. When Eddie Murphy became attached to the project, writers Barry Blaustein and David Sheffield, who had worked with Murphy during his Saturday Night Live days, had to significantly rework the screenplay to match his specific comedic strengths and the kind of character he could believably portray. This rewriting process changed not just the dialogue and jokes, but also the fundamental personality of the main character to fit Murphy's more energetic and confident screen persona, ultimately creating the smooth-talking advertising executive Marcus Graham that audiences saw in the final film. Fact 7. Toni Braxton's career launched by pregnancy. The song Love Shoulda Brought You Home that became Toni Braxton's breakthrough hit and launched her solo career was originally written by Babyface and Daryl Simmons specifically for R&B legend Anita Baker, but Baker's pregnancy ended up changing the course of music history when she had to decline the opportunity. The song's title came directly from a line of dialogue in Boomerang, where Halle Berry's character Angela angrily tells Marcus that love should have brought your ass home last night after he cheats on her. The producers wanted this emotional moment from the film to become a major soundtrack single, so they commissioned Babyface to write a song based on that specific line, and they immediately thought of Anita Baker as the perfect artist to perform it. Baker was one of the biggest R&B stars of the late 1980s and early 1990s, known for her sophisticated sound and incredible vocal range, which made her seem like the obvious choice for such an important soundtrack contribution. However, when the producers approached Baker about recording the song, she was pregnant and had decided to take a break from performing and recording new material during that time in her life. Instead of just declining and leaving it at that, Anita Baker made a suggestion that would completely change Toni Braxton's life and career. Baker had heard the young singer's demo version of the song and was so impressed that she recommended the producers give the opportunity to Braxton instead. Baker specifically told them to let the girl who was singing the demo record it as her own single, which led to Braxton getting her first major solo recording contract with LaFace Records, and the song becoming a top 5 hit on the R&B charts. Fact 8. Robin Givens cast for her scandal. Robin Givens was cast as the manipulative boss Jacqueline in Boomerang specifically because of her controversial public image, from her highly publicized and messy marriage to boxer Mike Tyson, even though studio executives at Paramount Pictures were extremely nervous about putting her in such a major role. At the time of filming in 1991, Givens was widely disliked by the American public because of how her relationship with Mike Tyson had played out in the media. The couple had married in 1988, but their marriage quickly became a tabloid sensation filled with accusations, public fights, and dramatic interviews that made Givens appear cold and calculating to many people who followed the story. The media coverage had labeled Givens as a gold digger and manipulator, who had used the famous heavyweight boxing champion, and this negative perception made Paramount executives worry that audiences would reject her presence in a major Eddie Murphy comedy. They were concerned that her real-life reputation would overshadow her performance and hurt the film's box office potential, especially since romantic comedies typically require audiences to like and sympathize with the main characters. However, director Reginald Hudlin saw Givens's controversial public image as the perfect qualification for playing Jacqueline, a character who was supposed to be a strong, formidable woman who could match Eddie Murphy's womanizing character move for move. Hudlin felt that Givens's reputation actually made her ideal for the role because audiences already saw her as someone who could control and manipulate powerful men, which was exactly what Jacqueline needed to do to Marcus in the story. Hudlin wanted the audience to feel like this would be a fair fight between two equally matched players, and Givens's real-life persona helped establish that dynamic from the moment she appeared on screen. Fact 9. Grace Jones made Halle Berry cry from laughing. Grace Jones's performance during the fragrance presentation scene in Boomerang was so incredibly funny and outrageous that Halle Berry was literally crying off camera because she couldn't stop laughing, and she had to keep recovering her composure every time the director needed to film her reaction shots. The scene takes place during a corporate meeting where the advertising team is presenting the new perfume campaign to Grace Jones's character Strange A, the eccentric French spokesperson for the fragrance. Jones plays the character as a completely over-the-top fashion model who speaks in a mix of French and Italian and behaves in the most bizarre and unpredictable ways possible, which was essentially a parody of her own real-life persona. as one of the most unconventional performers in entertainment. Director Reginald Hudlin has described how what Grace Jones was doing on the set while they were shooting was so funny that he remembers Halle Berry crying off camera because she was trying to keep a straight face during the scene but absolutely couldn't manage it. Berry was supposed to maintain her professional composure as Angela, the sweet and sensible art director, while watching this completely insane presentation unfold in front of her. The problem was that Jones's performance was so hilariously unpredictable and committed that it was breaking up everyone on the set, especially Berry, who would just start literally crying from laughing so hard whenever she was off camera. According to Hudlin, whenever Berry was visible in the shot, she was able to recover and deliver her lines professionally. But the moment the camera wasn't on her, she would completely lose it again because Jones never stopped being completely committed to the outrageous character, even between takes. Fact 10. The naked airport security scene. Grace Jones filmed a completely outrageous deleted scene at Newark Airport where her character Strange A had to strip completely naked and walk through the metal detectors because her signature chain metal dress kept setting off security alarms. But the filmmakers ultimately decided the scene was too shocking to include in the final movie. The scene was filmed as part of the storyline where Strange A is traveling for the perfume commercial shoot, and it was meant to show just how committed her character was to her bizarre fashion choices, even when they created practical problems in real-world situations. Jones's character wore an elaborate dress made entirely of metal chains that looked incredibly striking and fit perfectly with her avant-garde fashion persona, but it also meant that she couldn't walk through airport security without causing every alarm to go off. Instead of simply removing the dress or finding an alternative solution like a normal person would, Strange A's response was to take off the entire chain metal outfit right there in the airport security area and walk through the metal detectors completely nude, treating the whole situation as if it was perfectly natural and reasonable. This was exactly the kind of completely unexpected behavior that made Grace Jones perfect for playing a character who was supposed to be a parody of eccentric fashion models and performance artists. However, when the filmmakers reviewed the footage during the editing process, they realized that the scene was so shocking and over the top that it threw off the rhythm and pacing of the entire movie. The scene was so outrageous that it would have overwhelmed everything else happening in the film, so they made the decision to cut it from the theatrical release and only used a small portion of the footage in the montage, showing the approved perfume commercial that appears later in the story. Fact 11. Empire State Building shot at 2 a.m. The emotional reconciliation scene where Marcus, Tyler, and Gerard hug in front of the Empire State Building was filmed around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, which is exactly the time when the building's famous lights are normally shut off for the night, creating a unique and atmospheric backdrop for one of the movie's most heartfelt moments. This scene happens near the end of Boomerang when Marcus finally realizes how badly he's treated his friends throughout the story and decides to make things right with Tyler, played by Martin Lawrence, and Gerard, played by David Alan Grier. The three men have been best friends since the beginning of the movie. But Marcus's obsession with women and his selfish behavior has damaged their relationships, and this moment represents his attempt to repair those friendships and show that he's learned to value the people who really care about him. The production team chose to film this important scene in the middle of the night, partly for practical reasons, since shooting in front of one of New York City's most famous landmarks during normal hours would have been incredibly difficult due to crowds and traffic. However, the late-night timing also created a perfect visual atmosphere for the emotional tone of the scene, with the darkened Empire State Building serving as a dramatic and iconic backdrop that emphasized the intimacy and sincerity of the moment between the three friends. The timing of the shoot meant that the cast and crew had to work through the night to capture this scene, but the result was a memorable moment that shows Marcus finally growing as a person and learning to prioritize his friendships over his shallow pursuit of women. The darkened building behind them creates a sense of quiet reflection that matches the emotional weight of Marcus's personal transformation. Fact 12. Eartha Kitt's script offense. Eartha Kitt initially turned down the role of Lady Eloise in Boomerang because she found some of the character's original dialogue offensive and inappropriate, and she only agreed to take the part after the filmmakers made significant changes to remove the material she objected to. Lady Eloise is the wealthy cosmetics company owner who seduces Marcus in one of the film's most memorable and uncomfortable scenes, where she uses her power and position to manipulate him into sleeping with her while he's hoping for a promotion after the corporate merger. The character was written as an aging but still sexually aggressive woman who refuses to act her age and continues to pursue much younger men with the same confidence and directness she used when building her business empire. However, the original script apparently contained dialogue and situations that Kit felt crossed the line from funny into genuinely offensive territory. Kit was a legendary performer with decades of experience in theater, film, and music, and she had very strong opinions about how women, especially older women, should be portrayed on screen. She was particularly sensitive to material that might reinforce negative stereotypes or present women in ways that were demeaning rather than empowering. Director Reginald Hudlin has said that Kit was actually the hardest person to cast in the entire film because of her concerns about the character's tone and behavior in the original script. The production team had to work with her to revise some of the more problematic jokes and dialogue before she felt comfortable taking on the role. Once the changes were made and Kit felt the character was being presented in a way she could support, she enthusiastically embraced the part and delivered one of the film's most memorable performances. Fact 13. The controversial Korean store joke. Halle Berry's character, Angela, speaks a phrase in Korean during the film and then translates it for Marcus as, "That means I'm sorry I shot you, but I thought you were robbing the store," which was a direct reference to a real and highly controversial incident that had happened in Los Angeles just before the movie was made. The joke appears in a scene where Angela is demonstrating her knowledge of different languages, but the specific Korean phrase she chooses to translate was referencing an actual news story that was extremely sensitive and tragic. In 1991, a Korean shop owner in Los Angeles shot and killed a 15-year-old African-American girl named Latasha Harlins during a confrontation over a bottle of orange juice, and the shop owner later received only a conviction for voluntary manslaughter with no jail time. This incident became a major flashpoint in the already tense relationship between Korean-American business owners and African-American customers in Los Angeles, and it was one of the contributing factors to the anger that exploded during the Los Angeles riots in 1992. The case was widely seen as an example of how the justice system failed to protect African-American victims, especially when the perpetrator was from another minority community. When the movie was released, the Korean phrase joke immediately caused controversy because many people felt it was making light of a serious situation that had resulted in the death of a young person and had contributed to racial tensions in one of America's largest cities. The original screenwriters Barry Blaustein and David Sheffield actually denied writing the scene and called the lines offensive, with Blaustein specifically crediting director Reginald Hudlin for adding the joke. Paramount spokesman defended the inclusion by claiming it was simply part of a good-humored comedic exchange between the characters. Fact 14. 3 future Bond stars unite. Boomerang accidentally brought together 3 actors who would later appear in different James Bond movies, creating an unintentional 007 reunion years before any of them actually joined the famous spy franchise. Grace Jones, who plays the outrageous supermodel Strange in Boomerang, had already appeared in the 1985 James Bond film A View to a Kill, where she played the villain Mayday opposite Roger Moore's Bond. Jones was one of the most memorable Bond villains of the 1980s, using her imposing physical presence and unique style to create a character who was both dangerous and completely unpredictable, which made her perfect for the role of the eccentric perfume spokesperson in Boomerang. Jeffrey Holder, who plays the goofy commercial director Nelson in the film, had appeared much earlier in the Bond series as the voodoo priest Baron Samedi in 1973's Live and Let Die with Roger Moore. Holder's character was one of the most supernatural and mysterious villains in the entire Bond franchise, and his deep, distinctive voice and tall, imposing figure made him instantly memorable to audiences who saw that film. Halle Berry, who plays Angela in Boomerang, wouldn't join the Bond universe until much later, when she starred as Giacinta Jinx Johnson in 2002's Die Another Day, opposite Pierce Brosnan's Bond. Berry's Bond girl was notable for being one of the most capable and independent female characters in the franchise's history, and her performance was so popular that there were discussions about giving her character a spin-off movie. The fact that all 3 of these actors ended up in the same romantic comedy in 1992 was completely coincidental, since Berry's Bond appearance was still more than a decade in the future, and nobody involved in making Boomerang was thinking about James Bond connections at the time. Fact 15. Critics called it science fiction. Some white critics reviewing Boomerang were so unfamiliar with successful black-owned businesses that they actually called the film science fiction and a fantasy, claiming that companies like Lady Eloise Cosmetics couldn't possibly exist in real life, which revealed their complete ignorance about African-American entrepreneurship and corporate success. The movie is set in a world where black professionals work at all levels of a major cosmetics company, from the mailroom workers to the CEO, and everyone in between holds positions of real authority and responsibility in a sophisticated corporate environment. For many white critics and audiences in 1992, this portrayal seemed so unrealistic that they couldn't accept it as a believable setting for a romantic comedy, despite the fact that such businesses had existed for decades. Director Reginald Hudlin has spoken about how frustrating this reaction was because these critics were essentially admitting their own ignorance about successful black businesses that had been operating for years. Hudlin specifically mentioned companies like Johnson Products, Johnson Publishing, Burrell Advertising, Uniworld Advertising, and various black law firms as examples of the kind of businesses that these critics apparently didn't know existed, even though they were well-established and successful enterprises. One particularly infamous review described the movie as a science fiction film specifically because the reviewer couldn't believe that black people could run successful companies at the level shown in the movie. This critic and others like him were trying to pass off their lack of knowledge about black business success as clever wit, but they were really just exposing how disconnected they were from entire segments of American business and culture. The irony was that audiences who were familiar with black professional culture immediately recognized the authenticity of the corporate world shown in Boomerang, and the film became popular precisely because it showed successful black characters in a sophisticated business environment that rarely appeared in mainstream Hollywood movies.